Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom, live across the world on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, it was a historic moment in London yesterday as European and world leaders gathered with our Prime Minister to support Ukraine.
This, of course, comes after Friday, where the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, faced a dressing down in front of the world's media by President Trump and his Vice President, J.D. Vance. This is what happened.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring it into this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President.
So that was Vice President J.D. Vance, and things then got heated. Donald Trump stepped in. Here's what happened.
We're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, ever, in over 40 years of journalism, ever. I mean, I'm sure it goes on behind the scenes, but it's not normally conducted. And I did feel that he sent in the Vice President as his bully boy to rough him up.
Do you?
Yeah. I think they're good cop, bad cop, and then Trump piled in too.
That was to the end of 50 minutes of debate, which I like the fact that they're doing it in public rather than behind closed doors, because I think it shows a transparency from the Trump administration. They are not hiding anything. They said they were going to run on a ticket of being more open and honest with the American public, and they're certainly doing that. Zelensky sat there like he was in his PE kit in the headmaster's office getting a telling off. But until that point, Trump had been patient, he'd been calm, Zelensky was rolling his eyes, he was looking shifty, he wasn't really listening. And what they took objection to is they'd clearly made a deal behind the scenes about Trump being able to access these raw materials, these minerals which Ukraine have, which we need in computing and various technologies. They'd made that deal, and then Zelensky went out in front of the world's media and basically tried to force them into a position where they would agree to offering protection for Ukraine into the future. And that means making Ukraine a member of NATO. That is the red line in the sand for Putin.
Well, it doesn't have to go that far. What he wanted was a commitment from America, which Britain was trying to get to, and the whole meeting yesterday was about to get what they call a security protection. That's not NATO. There's no way Ukraine's going into NATO. He's not getting that. And the European leaders who gathered yesterday know that too, but they want to have some form of security. But here's the thing. They'll get it the moment the mineral deal is signed, because Trump won't want Russians going anywhere near his minerals. That's
not it. I don't see it like that at all. No, it's not that, because what Trump kept saying repeatedly in that whole 50 minutes was, we need peace, and J.D. Vance was saying the same thing. We just want death to stop. We want these people to stop dying. And Zelensky was effectively saying that wasn't important to him. He was just saying, we need a backstop, we need protection from you. And you could see Trump getting more and more wound up. He was very patient, he was very gracious with him. And then when J.D. Vance stepped in, quite rightly in my opinion, and said to him, show some gratitude, we're trying to save your country. Zelensky is not shifting one inch on this in terms of a compromise. He won't even enter into a conversation as to what that looks like. Without any clear strategic aim and any clear objective of how to get there, this will go on for years, because Biden had no clear strategic aim, and it's been a disaster for 3 years. It was quite obvious that the two of them in America, they just want it to end.
Yeah, but you're left at the end of it thinking that Trump and the vice presidents think that Putin's the good guy here.
I didn't think that. And he kept, but do you know what? One of the reporters asked him, one of the reporters said, whose side are you on, he said to Donald Trump. Are you on Zelensky's side or are you on Putin's side? And Donald Trump said, I am on neither side because I can't be on a side if I have to broker this deal.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely correct. If you are mediating some sort of situation, you have to be as objective as possible. And he knows that Putin's watching.
But also, he did say initially when they were in Saudi Arabia, no, Ukraine's not involved in the talks. Come on, Ukraine has to be involved in the talks. It's their country.
But he had him there in the room. He's clearly involving him in the talks. He said he hasn't sat in that room with Putin.
And I don't think he'd speak to Putin like that.
We don't. Who cares?
I do. I care a lot.
Yeah, but who cares how he'd speak to Putin?
Because Putin invaded Ukraine.
Putin
invaded Ukraine, and his troops are still there.
It's not that simple. It's not that simple.
It is to Zelensky.
But that's what... Well, then he better get used to buckling up. Then he better get used to dragging off more young men off the street to go fight the war that none of them want to fight. Because if that's what he says, then... He said about 4 hours ago, he said, if I achieve NATO, I will have achieved NATO. His English is very bad anyway, so it's quite difficult to work out what he's saying.
He should have had
but he said, if I achieve NATO, I would have achieved my mission. Whose mission? America's.
Well, he won't get NATO. But also, I think the other thing is there should have been translators because English is not his first... Yeah, it's his
that's because he was parachuted in by the Americans after being a comic actor. Yeah. Let's talk to former Australian MP and independent journalist George Christensen and retired British Army officer and military logistics expert Major General Tim Cross. Morning, gentlemen. Tim, let's start with you then, Tim. What is the strategic aim here for Zelensky? What can he possibly achieve?
Well, those two are not the same thing. I mean, his strategic aim is to regain all Ukrainian territory, join NATO and be secure. He ain't going to achieve that, I'm afraid. What's likely to come out of this is obviously very difficult to really know. Events will drive things over the next few weeks, I suspect. But I don't think there's any chance of him joining NATO. No. I think what the Prime Minister is doing is extremely laudable, and I don't say that to be condescending. I think he's been very good over these last few days. But the chances of Putin actually, first of all, wanting to sit down to reach some sort of peace agreement at the moment, I think is pretty unlikely. If you were Putin, you'd be sitting watching NATO falling apart, and you'd say to yourself, why do I need a peace agreement? And secondly, even if he were to agree to something, he's made it quite clear, Russia's made it quite clear, they don't want NATO troops inside Ukraine. So it's all very well saying, we'll form a coalition of the willing, and it'll include Britain and France and the rest of NATO countries. I'm not that convinced that he will allow them in. And then what sort of operation would it be? I mean, clearly President Zelensky wants security. He wants some sort of guarantee that there will be some backup to any military, capability. Classic peacekeeping operations, that's not the answer. Some sort of peace enforcement operation, which I took part in the Balkans twice, where the force is a coalition of the willing with a lead nation, which normally is the US, but in this circumstance looks like it would be us, needs to have rules of engagement that enable them to do something about it if Russia would, in 2 years' time, for example, continue to press on into Ukrainian territory. So all of these things, I think, are pretty, they're pretty unlikely at the moment, if I'm honest. But we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully, clearly I'm not against a peace agreement. I hope desperately there is one, but very difficult to see. OK,
Tim, thank you. George Christensen, where does this go next?
Well, hopefully, with Keir Starmer talking about boots on the ground, it doesn't go towards World War III. If the boots are on the ground in the western part of Ukraine, that might be fine. But if it involves having open firefights between NATO countries, Western forces and Russian forces, then you think that Russia is just going to say, oh, well, we are not now at a state of war with the rest of Europe. I mean, that is ridiculous, and it will drag us into World War III. So, as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is right here. We need to sue for peace. The only peace that is going to be left out of the situation is one that actually involves sovereignty, and that's sovereignty for the eastern part of Ukraine. The people there have voted overwhelmingly to cede from Ukraine. They do not want to be under control of Kiev. And so why is Zelensky so tied to keeping him there? I mean, if Scotland voted to leave the United Kingdom, I'm sure that England wouldn't send in the troops and start shelling Glasgow. But that's what's happened in Ukraine, in the Donbass, since 2014. And I got to say, that's the unspoken part of the whole Ukrainian history. The people there who, where the Russian troops are, do not actually want to be part of Ukraine anymore. They want to be independent and they want the protection of Russia.
I see it similarly, I have to say. Tim Cross, is that the way you see it, that whilst we ignore this history, we're just rattling our way towards World War III?
Well, anything is possible. I don't actually think a world war is a world war. I don't think that's probable. There's no doubt that Russia is not going to cede this territory that it's captured as part of any agreement. And I don't think Trump believes they should, actually, which I think is a shame. But I don't think Trump believes they should. So it seems to me, and it has seemed to me for quite a long time, actually, that Zelensky is just going to have to face up to the reality of what's happening around him. I don't like it at all. I do think that actually, a sovereign state being invaded by another state, which is what has happened here, we collectively should not allow that to happen. And the problem is, for 3 years, we have not given sufficient support to Ukraine to enable them to push Russia out of the captured territories. We sort of drip-fed in sufficient military support to enable them to hold the line. And they've done a fantastic job in doing that. But the reality is that Russia has captured the territory it's captured, and it's very difficult to see how that Russia is going to give that back up again. Particularly if the Americans pull the plug on military supplies. Europe's not going to be able to fill that gap. Eventually it could, but it would take a long time.
We're really tight on time, gentlemen. So if I could ask you both, it's a one-word answer to this question. Should Zelensky apologise when he goes back to the White House? Yes or no? George?
Yes, absolutely.
Tim?
No, but he should frame his diplomacy better, and they should brief him. But no, apologise. He was ambushed, crying out loud.
Who was ambushed? Zelensky?
Oh, I think he was.
Oh, no. Did you watch the whole thing?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I watched the whole 50 minutes, and he wasn't ambushed. I thought they were polite, they were kind.
Was
he was, say again?
With an agenda. He was schooled, he went in with an agenda.
They even got a patsy journalist to ask a question about why wasn't he wearing a suit rather than a uniform. Did he not notice that Elon Musk was in the White House last week in a tracksuit with his child on his shoulders at a press conference? But that's OK for Elon Musk.
All irrelevant. All irrelevant. While hundreds of thousands of innocent people are dying.
Double standards.
What he wears is absolutely irrelevant.
I am in military uniform, and I'm going to stay in military uniform whilst my people are dying. Whilst Russia
Well, playing a character.
We've just gone on the... Anyway, we're all entitled to our view.
We're all entitled to our view, and that's what we do. Thank you so much, independent journalist and former Australian MP George Christensen there, and retired British Army officer Major General Tim Cross. Let us know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say.
Let's get the latest travel.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
There's some wet and windy weather on the way for Iberia over the next couple of days, but higher pressure further east is bringing some sunshine. However, there is still some showers around, particularly across parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. High pressure, though, brings sunshine